We bring Douglas Ollivant, Senior National Security Fellow for the New America Foundation. He joins us tonight from Washington, D.C. Sir, thank you so much for joining us here on Al Jazeera. Now, Izzat al-Douri has been reported dead several times before. We're going to wait, of course, for the DNA tests. But from everything that you've seen and heard today, do you think that this time he really is dead?
The initial signs are certainly positive, but as you say, we've seen this movie before. I've probably seen him declared dead 7 or 8 times in the last decade, so like you, I will wait for the DNA tests.
I guess if he is dead, it would be a feather in the cap for the Iraqi government to have killed Saddam Hussein's second-in-command, also who has alleged links to ISIL. But aside from the symbolism, how big a difference would his death actually make to the fight against ISIL?
I think this will be mostly a symbolic victory. Even when a leader is fully engaged, like Saddam Hussein or Zarqawi or Osama bin Laden, removing them often has very little effect on the organization. New blood moves up, new leaders emerge. Don't get me wrong, we're all glad that he's gone, if he is gone, but in terms of the day-to-day operations, it will probably have very little effect.
Al-Douri was famously the king of clubs in the U.S.'s most wanted list in Iraq. He's been on the run since 2003. He had a bounty on his head of $10 million. He outlived the U.S. occupation in Iraq. I mean, certainly his survival story as such is remarkable. How much do you think does it highlight the durability of the Ba'athist insurgency 12 years after the fall of Saddam?
Well, he certainly personified the survival of the Ba'athists. You know, he was an old man. I mean, with all apologies to my father, he's my father's age. So I suspect that the real power had long since devolved to his former lieutenants, men in their 50s, early 60s, more in their prime. But nonetheless, he certainly served as a symbol of the integration of the Ba'ath Party into ISIL.
And what kind of impact do you think the Ba'athists have had on ISIL, both strategic, I guess, and also ideological?
Well, ideologically, this goes back to 1993 and Saddam Hussein's faith campaign, bringing elements of Salafist Islam into the Ba'ath Party. But moving forward, certainly over the last 2 or 3 years, if not earlier, we've seen a major infusion of Ba'ath officials or former Ba'ath officials into ISIL, which has given them a great deal of technical capability, mostly intelligence and strategy, and certainly the ISIL seizure of Mosul, what we saw last summer to Tikrit, the other towns, would not have happened without the integration of the Ba'ath into ISIL's organization.
And do you think that there are any other significant figures from the Saddam era who still wield power in Iraq today? Or is it because now the top tier has effectively gone, we just don't really know the names of the middle-ranking officers at the time who may be prominent today?
I think that's correct. I mean, the people who specialize in this, who, work this day-to-day at CENTCOM or in the CIA probably know the names. But for the bulk of us, these, the people who are now managing this inside ISIL, former Ba'ath officials, were relatively anonymous figures in the fall of the regime. They would have been lieutenant colonels, junior colonels, men in their late 30s, early 40s who 12 or 13 years later are now coming into their prime.
And so for the U.S. and its involvement in Iraq, assuming al-Douri is really dead, do you think this is positive or ultimately just a little bit too little too late?
Well, certainly it would have been good to take him away 5 or 6 years ago. Again, he was an old man now in his 70s, and I suspect that his value was much more about propaganda and perhaps just managing the network than actually being hands-on, the bulk of which is probably being done by men in their 40s and 50s.